Okay, in this video I'm going to talk about strokes. And strokes are important because they're the leading cause of disability in the United States. They're a very important cause of death. Okay, they cause a lot of death in the United States. So I just kind of want to go through quickly and describe what strokes are, how they occur, um, and hopefully just give you a better understanding of kind of what's going on here. So a stroke, clinically, is known as a cerebrovascular accident, typically just shortened to CVA. And one thing that all strokes have in common is that there is an interruption of blood flow to a portion of the brain, and this can be very dangerous because the brain pretty much controls everything. And there are a couple of ways by which these strokes can occur. One is you can have an occlusion, you can have a blockage of blood vessels that supply the brain with blood. Okay, so these can be blood clots that come from elsewhere in the body. For example, maybe you have a blood clot that formed in the heart, and that clot makes its way into these vessels that supply the brain. So this vessel here is called the internal carotid artery. This is the major vessel, one of the major vessels that actually goes up and will supply the brain with blood. So you can have a clot that forms somewhere else in the body and then travels up here and kind of gets stuck. And when it gets stuck, all of this blood can't get to the brain and supply it with oxygen. Now, another possibility is you might have a clot that forms right in the vessel itself. So it originates from the vessel itself. So if somebody has plaques that have built up in these blood vessels, it makes these blood vessels more prone to form a clot. So if you form a clot, you have the same result. Blood can't get to the brain can't get oxygen. Okay, and these can form in a number of locations. So if they form down in a very large vessel like the internal carotid artery, you're going to cut off a huge amount of blood supply to the brain. Now, if they form in a smaller area like one of these branches up here, then the deficit is less severe. Okay, so it really just depends on where these form as far as the severity of the manifestations of the stroke. Okay. Just to point out, this is just kind of a fun fact. The middle cerebral artery is a really common place for strokes to occur. So this is kind of a branch that comes off here. You see strokes occur in this artery relatively frequently. Now, another possible cause of a stroke is if somebody has an aneurysm that ruptures. So I'm going to take a portion of this blood vessel here, and we're just going to kind of blow it up a little bit. So here's the normal blood vessel. Okay. And what an aneurysm is when this blood vessel kind of balloons. Oops. So this blood vessel kind of balloons out like this. So the wall kind of balloons. And there are different types of aneurysms. But basically there's some sort of ballooning of the wall of the blood vessel. And what happens is when this balloons outward like this, it gets weak. And it can get so weak that it actually will rupture. And that's really bad. Okay, so if it ruptures, blood will, be able to get out like this. And what happens is not only do you interrupt blood flow past this point of the ruptured aneurysm, but you also are increasing pressure within the brain. So that itself is going to cause a number of problems. There are some other ways by which stroke can occur. So, for example, just if somebody is in septic shock, which I'll probably explain what septic shock is or what sepsis is in a later video, but if somebody has septic shock, they can have such a decrease of blood flow to the brain that they'll actually basically have a stroke. They will have lack of oxygen to the brain. Okay. But basically, somebody can have an occlusion, they can have a ruptured aneurysm. Remember, an aneurysm is just a kind of an outpocketing of the blood vessel. It's where they kind of dilate like a balloon. I always say that nobody ever dies of an aneurysm, but they can die of a ruptured aneurysm. So that's another possible cause of stroke.